We now live in a global economy, connected by the cloud, with these devices in the palm of our hand. They're on our wrists. They're at the command of our voice with Alexa and Siri. They're powered by this thing called big data, artificial intelligence, and machine learning. And all that brings incredible magic into our lives, doing things we couldn't imagine 10 years ago. But at the same time, it brings change and disruption. And that is the kind of future we have to be prepared for. Now, our own state has an amazing and exciting opportunity ahead, but we also have a current reality that we're all very aware of. National polls put us 48th, 49th, and 50th in a lot of things, except for the things we don't want to be near the top. Some of these devastating things like fighting addictions. And at the same time, there's bright spots everywhere. Our policymakers at a federal and state level are doing everything they can to level the playing field of opportunity for our people. Our universities are doing amazing work. West Virginia University, I had the chance to see all the work going on here, and I am blown away. I've had the chance to go to a lot of universities around the globe, and what is happening here is truly without peer. We also have things happening with companies coming in, N4 in Charleston, my own company in Bluefield, and all of that is exciting, but we have our work cut out for us. And so this is a chance for us to say, how do we build on those historical accomplishments and embrace the future? And as I look ahead, I see two equalizers, two opportunities that will really level the playing field for West Virginia. Because all that I think we need is the talent that already exists in our state. I believe if you look back at our history, going back to the earliest days, the mountains broke the spirit of common men and women. Only the hardiest of the hardy could survive here. God made a special breed when He made mountaineers. He made individuals who would blaze trails instead of follow paths. And looking ahead, there are two trails that light the way: education and entrepreneurship. Those are the great equalizers that will transform a tough reality into an amazing opportunity. But our approach to both has to change. And if you don't mind, I'll spend a few minutes talking about what I have seen happening and what I think can happen here, and then I'll open it up to questions. Is that fair? Let's start with education. I am the product of a West Virginia public education. And I am proud to be a product of a West Virginia public education. And as I traveled around the world and I went to the Silicon Valley, people greeted me and said, "So, Smith, how does it feel to work with people from MIT and Stanford and Yale and Harvard and come out of Marshall?" And I said, "Well, I tell you what I've learned over the years. I learned everything you learned in school. Mine costs $150,000 less, and we kick your butt every Saturday on the football field." Now, just imagine what WVU can say. Even better. And so, right off the bat, I would tell you, we have a great education system. But I've also had the chance to now be, for 35 years, hiring students coming out of the education system and studying the things that we're seeing around the globe. And there's been a framework that's emerged that I think is critical for the 21st century. I call it the 4Ds and the 4Cs. And I'll unpack what that means. The 4Ds are the four foundational skills that I believe students will need to have a grasp of so they can effectively compete. The first is discovery-driven thinking. It's also known as design thinking. No VC, no venture capitalist asks for a business plan these days. They want to know, show me the experiments you've run, the scenarios you have contemplated, and show me you have in-market evidence that it's going to work. We have to teach that capability in our students. The second D after discovery-driven thinking is developer acumen. We need to have the ability to see how ideas get expressed in code. My generation grew up learning how to write cursive to express our ideas. Now, I didn't end up being a journalist, but I had to learn how to write cursive. So whether you want to be a developer or not, all students should be exposed to how ideas get turned into code, just one or two classes, and then they can go on whatever path they want. The third D, after developer acumen, is design, also known as the arts. I don't advocate for STEM, I advocate for STEAM, because a world without arts is not a world worth living in. But there's also a practical reason. Technology is scary and intimidating. It can only become useful if it's made simple. That's why we love a one-click checkout on Amazon. That's why we love PayPal's just press a button or swipe left and swipe right, because it makes us all feel empowered, and we need a role for artists in the next chapter. And then the last D is data analytics. Whether you're managing a baseball team like Moneyball, or you're trying to monitor your health with a Fitbit or an Apple Watch, we have to teach students how to find patterns and seek truth in the data. So those are the 4 Ds: discovery-driven thinking, developer acumen, design or arts, and data analytics. And that takes me to the 4 C's. And the 4 C's are how we need to think differently about education. And this is something you may not know. The neuroscientists have studied the brains of the kids who were born after 2007. Does anybody know what happened in 2007? It was the invention of the iPhone. And what's happened is the generation that's grown up after 2007 have developed a biological capability that's never been present in any other generation before them. They have the ability to do multiple things simultaneously with equal skill. So as a parent who talked to his daughter and said, stop chatting with your friends, watching the YouTube, telling me you're doing your chemistry homework while you're listening to your music, there's no way you could do that, I was wrong. She did. They can do continuous partial attention. That's the gift. The shadow is the average attention span of a 13-year-old now is 8 seconds. 10 years ago it was 12 seconds. A goldfish is 9 seconds. So if we believe our educational approach is 45 minutes of lecture and then assigned homework, we will not only miss the opportunity to tap into these brilliant brains, we're going to have a problem with people wanting to go to class. So we have to rethink education. That's where the 4 C's come in. The first C is a connected, experiential learning environment, where students have the ability to choose to do some stuff online, in a classroom with their peers, out in the wild, and we don't make it a, hey, this is only available here and not there. We've got to find a way to make it more interconnected. The second C is to begin to focus on competency and not credit hour accumulation. And competency is the ability to demonstrate that what you learned in class can be applied in the real world. Today, if you interview for any job at PayPal, Adobe, Microsoft, Cisco, Intuit, we give every interview candidate a case study and a test to see if they can actually do the job that we want them to do. So we have to focus on competency. The third C, after having a connected classroom and competency, is to focus on completion. Now, this is the reality we know we face. About 50% of college students in the United States complete their 4-year degree in 6 years. The other 50% drop out, but they carry their portion of the $1.5 trillion of student loan debt, but they're labeled a college dropout with 0 credit for what they've learned. We need to think more inclusively with things like micro certificates, nano certificates, vocational and technical training, and all the things we can do to have a more broad education. And then the last C is community. And community is how do we get the problems that our local economies are wrestling with now into the classroom and let the students actually do their learning on that particular business to increase their foot traffic in Dunkin' Donuts, to help them with their local advertising and help the business at the same time they're learning. So those are the 4 Ds and the 4 Cs. And it's going to take a lot of work, but President Gee is already plowing the ground to do that. Marshall was doing the same thing. Kathy D'Antoni with Simulated Workplace and the new CTE programs in high school. West Virginia is on the forefront of trying to think about this, and I am excited because I think we're on something really big. That'll take me to my second topic, which is entrepreneurship, and this takes much shorter than the 4 Ds and the 4 Cs, and then we'll go to questions. Entrepreneurship is grounded in something that I call the 75% reality. 75% of the students graduating school right now do not want to work for another company. They want to start their own business and create their own thing. That is completely opposite of where it was in 1986 when I graduated and left the state. In my time, everyone wanted to work for General Electric and get a big job. Now they want to start their own thing. The second 75% reality is 75% of all jobs in the economies in the United States and every local community are created by startups and small businesses. So hoping that Amazon will open their headquarters here or Toyota will bring us another plant will not be the way that we get our economy going. It actually comes from startups, which takes me to the third 75% reality. Last year, 75% of all the venture capital money in the United States went to 3 states, California, New York, and Massachusetts. So while the passion is in our students and the talent is here, unfortunately the capital and the economy is not. And we are going to change that. And we can change that because we don't have to figure out how to invent it on our own. We can learn from others. We say in the Silicon Valley the best experiment to run is one someone already ran for you and proved that it would work. So we have studied Ireland 3 decades ago, much like West Virginia. They had industrial flight. They had a brain drain of their students wanting to leave. They were fighting addictions. Now they're the fastest growing economy in Europe, known as the Celtic Tiger. We have studied Israel, the startup nation. We have studied India and France. We've studied Pittsburgh and Detroit. And they all show us the way. And so we have the wisdom of their prior experiences, but we have one thing that also benefits us. There's a book written by an author named Angela Duckworth. The book is called Grit. 30-year study to predict what will guarantee the highest achievement in any profession, whether it's sports or business. And it's not IQ, it's not talent, it's perseverance. And we have produced perseverance and grit more than anyone else because we have had to learn to overcome adversity and problems. So I stand before you today an incredible optimist. I think the future is changing in our direction. We have the two keys to success, and they are an education that's going to be a very more interactive, experiential education that creates the next breed of entrepreneurs, and we're going to create the jobs and light the way for the rest of the world. And I will finish with this. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And that's why I love West Virginia University and all the other schools in the state saying, what can we do together to complement each other and help each other so this state gets stronger and we can once again put the nation on our back and carry them into the next century. So with that, I am done with my 4 Ds and 4 Cs and the entrepreneurship and the 75% reality, and I am absolutely delighted to take any questions that you would like to talk about.
Well, I love your optimism and appreciate your energy and your commitment to helping this state. So I'm really curious, when you think about education, and you mentioned this, we had a Benedum Scholars conference with 4 people that were chosen. And one was from humanities and one was from the STEM education. And the woman who was recognized for humanities said, we may use STEM to work, but we use humanities to live. And you mentioned about art. So talk about your perspective of somebody who's been in the STEM world and how that application domain from the arts, from humanities, from literature, from mythology, that maybe we don't do as well and when we're trying to help people find jobs, how that might fit in the future.
Yeah, it's a wonderful question. And when I share these 4 Ds, which are sort of 4 domains that will be important in a new world, those 4 domains are not the only thing that's important. In fact, if you elevator up, we had a panel of speakers about 2 weeks ago, and one of my peers was asked the question, what's the most important skill in the future? And they answered, critical thinking. We're dealing in a world now where you don't have enough time and you don't have enough data, but you still have to make a decision. And how do you step back and objectively assess all options and then make the best decision with the information you have? By the way, that comes from a breadth of experience and not a depth of singular focus. And that's where humanities come in, the arts come in. So I would say a couple of things come to light. One is, it is important, those who fail to study history are doomed to repeat it. So there's always a place to say we have a chance to learn from our history students. One of the most important skills of any entrepreneur and any leader, in fact, we just had a CEO forum in Washington, D.C., and the speaker spoke to us and said the most important skill you have is storytelling. Because facts win minds, stories win hearts, and if you don't have someone's heart, you're not going to have followership. And so that's where these kinds of notions come in. But if I actually say what's really important about the humanities, it brings critical thinking, it brings adaptability, storytelling, and understanding the lessons from the history to be applied to the future. And we need that in this next chapter. Yes?
Hi, Brad.
Hello.
Thank you again. Amazing. So I don't want to put you on the spot, but I'm interested in the intersection of your 2 ideas. In your opinion, can entrepreneurship be taught, or does it need to be learned by doing? Or
Entrepreneurship?
both? Yes, entrepreneurship.
Yes, entrepreneurship is not a press box job, it's down on the field. It's getting your hands dirty. In fact, one of the most popular books in the Silicon Valley is Getting to Plan B by Randy Komisar, who works at Kleiner Perkins, Caulfield, and Byers. And what he basically did was document the reality that Silicon Valley is not just have an idea and it turns into a big unicorn. In fact, 90% of all the companies we can name failed on their first attempt, many on the second and on the third. But they learned from their failures, and they embraced failure the same way they embrace success as a chance to learn. And so this is where experiential learning is so important, and that's what I loved about what I saw here today, the number of instances where we are literally applying what we think might work out with real businesses, or we're bringing businesses in, because that's the way you both grow the economy and you develop the lessons quickly by running experiments. So no question, entrepreneurship is a hands-on job. It's a learn by doing, and it's an innate skill. John Chambers and I often say, if our car is going to break down anywhere in the world, we want it to break down in West Virginia for 2 reasons. People will be kind enough to stop, and they'll know how to fix it. All we're talking about with these educational changes is to give our teams, our people, the new tools. Because I don't know about you, but I raise my hood now, and there's no carburetor, and I don't know where to check the dipstick because there isn't one. My dad taught me how to do all that, but the car's changed on me. So now I need to know the new tools to get that car fixed. But I'll figure it out if somebody shows me the tools, so that's it. Thank you.
Brad, thanks for being here. What are your thoughts around the particular sectors that might be the focus for entrepreneurship to diversify the economy here in West Virginia? Are there particular areas that you think we should be paying more or less attention to?
Yes, it's interesting. This is where I get encouraged by the work that's happening with West Virginia Forward, with West Virginia University, with Marshall. I was telling a team earlier, they asked me any piece of advice for us as entrepreneurs, and I said, yes, very few startups actually die of starvation. They die of indigestion. They try to do too many things. And the same thing I think applies to our state. We've got to pick the most important things to go after and not try to be great at everything. Be great at the things that we're either closest to the problem and no one else can understand the problem as well as we can. For example, telemedicine is a big issue around the world, and we have a challenge right now getting good health care to all of our people because we live back in the mountains and in the hollers. We should be on the leading edge of telemedicine. We should be on the leading edge of cracking this issue called opioid crisis. We've got amazing things going on here with our outside wilderness. In fact, I talked about Tulsa Remote. Has anyone here heard of Tulsa Remote? I know President Gee has. I'll come back to that one in a second. But I would say my recommendation would be to first say, where can we understand the problem better than anyone else? How do we marshal our resources, which is policy, universities, private industry, and nonprofits to say, let's all lean in and do our part to go after this, and let's build a core capability that the rest of the world can't match. And that's what we can do. Now, I'll give you an example of something I'm excited about. Today, we have all hoped for, when will the next company come into our state and open up an office and create 1,000 jobs? And we're not alone. Everyone's hoping for the same thing. And so when Amazon decided they were going to go out and build a second headquarters, all kinds of cities around the globe wrote in and said, do it here, do it here, do it here. And we all know how that turned out. But Tulsa, Oklahoma came up with an interesting idea. They did the work and said, guess what? 25% of all employees that work at Microsoft, Cisco, Intuit, and all these other companies are allowed to work from anywhere they want. They're called remote employees. They work from home. As long as they can log in and they can do a video chat, they don't have to work in an office. And so Tulsa said, well, we discovered something. This generation, millennials and Generation Z, love the outdoors. They hate commutes. They want to have affordable housing. And so Tulsa said, what if we get them to move here for 1 year? They got a founder, the foundation, Kaiser Foundation, said, we'll pay $10,000 to relocate you, and they thought they would get 100 people. You know how many people applied for Tulsa Remote? From all over, 10,000. The average people who moved to Tulsa, an average salary of $106,000. It was usually a couple and a kid. And all of a sudden, the tax base in Tulsa went up because they have a bunch of people coming in making $100,000. And then they put them in a facility like this where they got to sit next to their counterparts from Apple and Microsoft and Google. They started to talk and say, hey, I love my company, but why don't we start something? And they're now starting to create jobs. And that is a great opportunity. And I said, wow, there's no place better than West Virginia. Look at our mountains, whitewater rapids, ATVs, I mean, affordable housing. We've got all of this. We should be West Virginia remote and just light up the world. So that's a problem I think we could go after. But anyway, I get a little excited, as you can see. I may be an eternal optimist. I don't know.
I love it. Brad, thank you for being in here. It's been a wonderful day. My question is related to Elizabeth Holmes and the story of Theranos with the $9 million market cap. It was not really a product that she was marketing. She dropped out of Stanford and built a company, and it was fraudulent. As educators, how do we build an ethical model in our students, teach ethics, tandem in an entrepreneurial mindset?
You know, I think it goes beyond educators. It starts at home. and I know that we all recognize that we've got things we've got to work through right now, challenges, families that are fractured, dealing with their own issues, sometimes their addiction, sometimes their unemployment, disability. But we do have to instill in all of our students and all of our youth that values are the only way that you get through this world. And you will be judged at some point in time for all the actions you have. And so I think all of us, I truly believe that raising a child takes a village. I can tell you, Cerrito Canova raised me. And it wasn't just my mom, because my mom wasn't able to keep an eye on me the whole time, but she was sure the first one to know when I did something wrong. And I still had to confess at the bathtub because somebody called and told on me. So we've got to find a way to collectively do that. But I think it's important to, we talk about humanities, ethics is a critical course. Now there's some interesting work that's been done on Elizabeth, and I don't want to go through the pros and cons of it, but what's interesting is good people can go off track, and then they can't find a way back, and so they hope to double down and eventually come out the other side, and in this case, she did not, and she took a lot of people down with her. But we've got to kind of intervene when we see that happening and say, whoa, that's not the way you want to go. But it does take a collective we. And I think educators, it's ethics, and those courses need to be a part of our curriculum. Yes?
Hey Brad, Demetrius Jones here. Glad to see your jacket made it through lunch.
Yeah, I was with the students earlier and I found a thread and I started to pull on it and it literally became this long and I was afraid my sleeve was going to come off and I said, at least you know not to be nervous around me, so I just snipped it and we're good.
Gotcha. Is it clear now? All right, so coming through elementary and middle school, as a high performer, I was taken out of my classes to be a part of the gifted program.
Yeah.
If any of you educators are familiar with that, you get to leave English or leave math to go and do things like building structures with toothpicks and marshmallows, critical thinking, understanding how to solve problems that are non-traditional. Now, if that was given to all of my peers, imagine how advanced the state would be.
Yes.
And so with that concept, what I'm asking is, at what stage do we begin implementing design thinking and new age critical solving skills within the youth?
I think we can start pre-K, and we need to start pre-K. And what's amazing is we've all studied the Pygmalion theory and what happens when teachers back in the 60s and 70s told some students that you're gifted and told other students that you weren't, and at the end of the semester it was a self-fulfilling prophecy. We thought we knew all the innovators at Intuit, and then we adopted in 2008 10% unstructured time, which we borrowed from Google, which was 10% of all employees. All of our employees got 10% time to work on anything they want. And then we actually looked at the ideas that rose to the top, and we were surprised that it rose from people we didn't even know. And so there is amazing talent. God put gifts inside of every one of us. And so to your point, instead of hand selecting the, hey, you're special, you should go here, we got to find a way to bring all that into the core curriculum for everyone. And so right now there's work going on with Save the Children to say how do we get more interactivity built into the pre-K situation. K through 12, there's work that we're trying to learn about to say how do we actually build critical design thinking into their curriculum. And there's some neat things going on. Right now Kathy D'Antoni has been doing 10 through 12 grades, but we're now doing some stuff in middle school. I love the work that your university's championing around getting robotics as a competitive sport. Wayne High School called me 2 years ago, that's where my dad graduated, and said, hey, we just need a little bit of money. We don't even have a maker's lab. And it was not a big check. I mean, believe me, it was a small check compared to some checks I'm asked to think about. We wrote it, and then they went to the national competition. I couldn't believe it. I said, they got 2 nickels and a rubber band, and they went to the competition. So we've got to build that into our schools, and we also have to have our community colleges and our universities think about design thinking. Now, here's the good news. We have studied design thinking from Stanford's D School. In fact, one of the co-founders is on Intuit's payroll as our Chief Product and Design Officer. We've now codified it into a 2-day course. It used to be called plagiarism, now it's called benchmarking. We're allowed to take it, and we did. And we are offering it to West Virginia University. We talked about it earlier. We're offering it to Marshall. We've given it to Kathy D'Antoni for the simulated workplace. And we're even offering our people get 10% time to volunteer and they want to come back and help teach. So all those things are available to us. We just have to jump in on them and say, let's go try it. Cool. I know we talked about this earlier, so I apologize.
She's already telling us we have to do it.
Listen, others. We got one here and then we'll come back.
We've talked about the importance of avoiding indigestion, focusing on what's important. We mentioned the players, the nonprofits, education, and so forth. I'm wondering about government. That's something which is a big debate these days. What's the role of government in setting priorities and in providing direction?
You know, I'm going to say this in a way that is not in any way, shape, or form designed to represent a party, because I don't know what any of the parties represent these days, so I just want to say that out front. Government's job is to remove barriers and get out of the way. And so I can tell you we had CEO from PayPal, CEO from Adobe, myself, and Nike dialed in 2 weeks ago for the speaker series. Backstage, we had a chance to talk to people, and they said, hey, what will it take? Do we need more favorable taxes? You know, do we need to do this? And the answer was no, we actually follow talent, and we follow infrastructure. And I think you have the talent, especially as the education system is starting to lean in and teach more experiential thinking. But our infrastructure right now, the last time I saw, we have 49% broadband connectivity across the state. We have got to find a way to solve that. And so when I spoke to the legislature last week via video, there's a lot of things going on. I'm so excited about the FinTech Sandbox. I am really intrigued by the Sovereign Fund. And I think those are incredibly important and necessary. But if I could say you only get to do one thing, I would say we have got to get out of our way and figure out how we get private industry, public policy, nonprofit, and donors to come in and say, get this entire state connected. Because I just got back last week talking to the CTO, Chief Technology Officer in Washington, D.C. for the White House. And they said we're focused on 4 technologies: artificial intelligence, number 1, advanced manufacturing, number 2, 5G, number 3, and what was I forgetting? I said oh my gosh. And quantum computing, yes, thank you, number 4. And 5G, if you don't have the fiber now, we're never going to catch up. So we've got to find a way to do that, and we can do that. So that would be my one thing for government, is provide the infrastructure, and then we will start to solve some of the other things like K through 12 education and livability and all the things that Tulsa and other places have learned. That will come if we can actually get the connectivity so everyone has access to the same stuff. I know that's a very particular thing, but I used to say, here's 3 things. And then I'd say, okay, maybe 2 things. Now I'm saying, guess what? I'm just going to be really clear. There's one thing. If there's only one thing I could wave a magic wand, it would be that. Yes?
So I can speak. Well, come on, gotcha. So I would say that lack of internet connectivity is also a social disparity of health, and
Yes.
lifespan goes down. I wanted to ask you a question about Project Aristotle, Google's study, and looking at their highest performing
Yes.
teams and finding that psychological safety was really important, and Amy Edmondson's, the
Yes.
Fearless organization. So talk about the role of the right environment to facilitate and encourage entrepreneurs and this sort of grit cycle that you talked about.
Yes, if you're not familiar with it, they did a lot of work to try to figure out what's the role of a manager in creating an environment where people can actually be productive and innovative and bring their whole selves to work. And it touches on diversity and inclusion, but what it really does is create an environment of safety. And the number one thing that people are afraid of doing is doing something wrong. And so one of the things that we try to do in our company and others try to do is to treat failure and success equally as a chance to learn. In fact, our values say fail fast so you can succeed faster. And so the environment where you're not asking people, well, what did you do? I mean, why didn't that work? And instead you're saying, tell us what you learned so we can share that with others, and then we can go make a bunch of new mistakes, because that's how we learn. That is the thing that we need to try to build into an entrepreneurial environment, because 1 out of 2 small businesses fail in the first 5 years. 9 out of 10 actually fail over 10 years. But the average entrepreneur will start 3 businesses before they finally hit it. And so we've got to be okay with getting up and dusting ourselves off. And we've got to create that environment which teaches that's okay. It's a good question. You've been doing all your reading there. Project Aristotle, that was pushing me to my brink for a minute. Yes.
Hi, Brad. Just a quick question. I know that you guys, Intuit has the call center or success center that's down in Bluefield. I wondered if you could speak to that and how that's going.
We do. So we have always had a company mission of powering prosperity, helping the families who struggle to make it paycheck to paycheck live a better life, help increase the odds of success of small businesses so 1 out of 2 don't fail, and increase the household savings rate of everyone as a result. And over the years, we've tried to do that through our products. We've tried to do that through our expertise and our people. But one of the things we began to realize is just like everyone else, coming out of the Great Recession, there were places that recovered and places that didn't. And we noticed that we had a real opportunity to try to bring the Silicon Valley and the jobs and the techniques to these communities that most people were saying all their better days were behind them. So we actually brought jobs back onshore that were offshore, and we put them in communities that truly were really disadvantaged or challenged. Wise, Virginia, Hazard, Kentucky, Johnstown, Pennsylvania, Bluefield. And what we began to notice were the following things. First of all, the quality of the customer success goes up 4 to 6 points, which statistically is meaningful. 1 point drives $20 million in profit. The second thing we noticed is we had lower employee attrition. These employees stayed and they were fired up and excited, and they brought a lot of new ideas and engagement. For every dollar that we put into the community, it creates $1.59 in economic benefit. And now we've had PayPal and Salesforce and others saying, hey, we want to be a part of the Prosperity Hub with you because we've got these jobs. We need Salesforce integrators. We need Adobe Spark students. We need these kind of people. Can we work with you to create these opportunities? And so I'm super excited. These are called Prosperity Hubs. We have 7 of them now. We're going to have 20 across the country, physical. And we just introduced a virtual one for all of our military veterans that are coming home and for their significant others so that they can be a part of this as well. And I just think it's a real opportunity for us to start to create more equality and inclusion in our economy. Yeah. We're going once?
Some applause, by the way.
For you all, thank you.
One more question?
Yes, I will take one more question.
One more question from the audience. Yes, please, and then we'll let Brad. Yeah.
Okay.
As a business student and somebody who's been in all these classes and took leadership, I just have like a personal question for you.
Yes.
As you rose through the ranks and you became the successful person that you are, how did you motivate people to follow your visions?
This is going to be an interesting answer because in good West Virginia fashion, I'm going to tell a story. My wife and I have 2 beautiful daughters who've now graduated from college and are now starting their lives. But when we lived in Atlanta for a period of time, my youngest daughter at the age of 8 decided she wanted to take up soccer. Now, most kids had started at the age of 3, so by the age of 8, these young girls and boys were already bending it like Beckham. I mean, they were just incredible. They looked like the next thing going to the World Cup. So like all good helicopter parents, we found a league where she would be with others who were just starting. And we bought her a new uniform, and we bought her a ball, and we wrote her name in magic marker. We showed up 10 minutes before practice like all the other parents, and the kids were out there kicking the soccer balls, and they began to get in arguments, and they began to cry because one of them got pushed down and got grass stains on their new uniform, and someone else smudged their magic marker. And here came this coach pulling up in an SUV with a bag of soccer balls over one arm and a net over the other, walked right past us and put the net up at the end of the field, and then came over to drop the bag of balls. But every single kid on that field looked at that net and began to kick the balls, whether it was theirs or someone else, into the net. And then they jumped up and high-fived like they won the World Cup. And that's when it hit me. Leadership is about being really clear what success looks like and getting the hell out of the way. And so I learned a long time ago, Peter Drucker was right. The bottleneck is always at the top of the bottle. All I have to do is say, this is what we have to do. Go get her done and let me know if I can remove any barriers along the way. And that truly has been the one thing I've tried to stick to. And I apologize for my French. My mom would not be happy. But I told her I am bilingual, and those words come out ever so often. So I just want to let you know. All right, thank you, everybody. Appreciate it. Thank you, I appreciate it. Thanks.